Welcome back to our fourth session of Dining with Diabetes. I'm so glad you all could join us here tonight on Zoom. So tonight's presenters are myself, Sarah Richard, the Health and Human Sciences Extension Educator in Lawrence County, and Molly Marshall, the Health and Human Sciences Extension Educator in Jackson County.
Hello, everyone. Glad you joined us on this last night.
All right, Molly, we'll go on to the second slide here. All right, so since our last meeting, I hope you all have made progress on your SMART goals. So does anyone have any updates from last week? Was there anything that you were able to work on? I know that one thing that I focused on this week was trying to incorporate more walking time in my days. So I spent about 15 to 20 minutes each day trying to walk and get that exercise in. Any updates from anyone on your SMART goals? And you're welcome to unmute yourself or tell us in the chat.
Well, Sarah, my Chuck is the one that's actually the diabetic in the family, and his blood sugar has consistently been going down with the things that we have learned. So that has been a huge win for us. His morning blood sugar, we've now for 2 days consistently has had it under 130. And his doctor said his goal was 130 or below.
That is awesome. So what are some changes that you all have made to accomplish that SMART step?
We have, he's done his best because he is a sweet tooth fiend. And with learning how to, trade those out with fruits, with no sugar added things, and just being a little more mindful of snacking on things that are, that aren't carb enriched and sugar enriched.
Excellent. And that's what we love to hear, is those small changes that we can make, substituting in some fruits or something like that if we still have that sweet tooth rather than going for the dessert. So that was a great change. That's wonderful. All right. So a few things that could also be incorporated into your SMART goals. And just a few additional things really to keep in mind. So there is an increased risk of heart attacks and strokes in people with diabetes. There are several ways to reduce this risk, including eating a heart-healthy diet, reducing your intake of certain kinds of fats, and also reducing your sodium intake can help lower your risk of heart attacks, strokes, and high blood pressure. As we've discussed in previous weeks, some fats are better for us than others, so we should try to choose more unsaturated fats and less of those saturated fats. So remember, all fats are high in calories. As we covered last week, Gail shared with us some nutrition labels, and those can help us determine the fat and sodium content in our foods. And those with diabetes should limit their sodium intake to around 1,500 milligrams a day. We talked about some of those alternatives of using seasonings to provide that flavor without adding that sodium in there. So just a review of our program sessions. On our slide, we have sessions 1 through 4. So the first session, we discussed what is diabetes. Session 2, we learned about carbohydrates and sweeteners. Session 3, we covered the topics of fats and sodium. And then this week, we are going to try to put everything together, so combining our knowledge and really doing an overview of some of the information as it applies to our diet. We also feature 2 side dishes today, and that's going to be a broccoli salad made by Janet Steffens and a quiche made by Sonia. So our program goals through these 4 weeks have really had 4 main purposes. So we want to learn information about diabetes, nutrition, and physical activity. We're going to learn healthier cooking techniques, share and learn from one another during this class time. And then, although we didn't get to have those taste tests, we were able to highlight some of those healthy recipes that you all are able to take those recipes and then make them at home. Just as a reminder, this program is not intended to provide individual, recommendations for meal planning, but it is here to provide just that general education on diabetes awareness and some healthier options for you along the way. So today's agenda, we're going to be putting it all together. Molly is going to cover our supermarket strategies for us. She's also going to review the Idaho plate method for planing meals. We're going to introduce some resistance exercise. We're going to do a final review of setting those SMART steps, so taking that knowledge and continuing it even after the class is ended. And then finally, we're going to have 2 food demonstrations, as I mentioned, and we're really looking forward to incorporating those into today's lesson. So as you all are aware, diabetes is hard on all parts of the body. Researchers believe high blood glucose and high blood pressure in people with diabetes causes changes in the blood vessels. And these changes may explain why people with diabetes have a higher risk of stroke, nerve damage, heart disease, loss of limbs, kidney failure, and blindness. This also may be one cause of high rates in men with diabetes. It is recommended all people with diabetes should control their blood glucose and blood pressure and follow a healthy eating pattern, which includes lowering the amount of fat in the diet and choosing the healthiest types of fat possible. And next up, Molly is going to present the slides for you all.
All right, thanks, Sarah. So we are going to review kind of what we talked about the last few weeks around carbohydrates. So foods that contain carbohydrates, those are our milk, fruit, grains, and starchy vegetables. We know they raise our blood sugar because carbohydrates are either sugar or starch. And it does not matter whether sugar occurs naturally or is added to the food during processing or preparation or even before eating, it all raises our blood sugar. So which types of foods here on this screen, knowing we've equipped you hopefully with the knowledge, which foods on the screen do raise our blood sugar? If you'd like to unmute or put it in the chat, we'd be happy to hear from you.
Milk and apple.
Woohoo! Great job. Oh, and I do need to say, so you can't see me cheerleading, I do have my camera off just for connective issues today. So you are exactly right, milk and fruit. Those are the 2 that will raise our blood sugar. And fruit has the natural sugar, fructose, and milk has lactose. So those are kind of, what we know raises our blood sugar. And can anyone name some starchy foods?
Potatoes.
Potatoes would be the starchy vegetables, yes. Anything else?
Peggy in the chat said most squash.
Squash would be a starchy vegetable, yes. And also things like
corn and peas.
Corn and peas, also starchy vegetables. Excellent, thank you. And then our other starches include things like pasta, rice, bread, crackers, all those kinds of things. So meal planning for people with diabetes, it's not a super easy task, and there is really no one size fits all plan. Some people choose to count carbohydrates, Others use the exchange method. And we've talked about in this class the Idaho plate method for people with diabetes. And following the Idaho plate method can help you eat healthy, lose weight, lower your cholesterol, and manage your diabetes. So looking at the plate method right here on the screen, we know that 1/4 of the plate should be bread, starch, grain group. For heart healthy eating, no more than 1/4 of the plate should be in meat. And then non-starchy vegetables should cover the 1/2 of the plate. The small circles represent single servings of fruit and milk. And as we know, and you guys have already said, we know milk, fruit, and starches raise our blood sugar the same way. So we can kind of interchange those a little bit as our food preferences desire. So let's look a little closer at the non-starchy vegetables.
Molly, before you get too far into that, we do have a question. Missy is wondering if the Idaho plate method is preferred over carb counting.
There is not a preference, one or the other. It's really kind of what you're comfortable with. I feel like most medical providers teach carbohydrate counting. And this is a little bit less, I would say scientific than that. So it's kind of working with your healthcare provider and you guys could come up together with what works best for you. We don't make a recommendation one way or another. This is just giving you a different option. So looking at the non-starchy vegetables, again, we would like 1/2 of our plate to consist of these, and you can see examples right there listed. So think of a big salad, cabbage, cucumbers, peppers, broccoli, carrots, celery, cauliflower, tomatoes. People who don't like vegetables may like them better if they're fresh, either from a garden or the farmer's market, but definitely it does not have to be fresh to be considered healthy. So that's kind of a main thing we want to make sure you all recognize. It doesn't have to be fresh. It doesn't have to be canned. Hopefully a combination of, frozen, fresh, and canned vegetables can help you meet all those needs. And remember, we do have that non-starchy vegetables handout, so you can always refer to that for additional ideas around non-starchy vegetables. So why do we want to eat vegetables? Well, they're a real nutrition bargain. They're super rich in vitamins, minerals, and antioxidants. They're also great sources of fiber and lower in carbohydrate than fruit, so we can eat larger serving sizes of them. In addition, usually a lot of times only a 1/2 cup of most cooked vegetables or 1 cup of most raw vegetables only has around 25 calories. So you can eat a lot of the vegetables and not get a lot of calories and get all those vitamins. So it's a win-win. However, of course, to every great thing, there may be an exception, and those are the vegetables that have a higher starch content. So we do have to watch our portions on these. And like you guys already said, potatoes, corn, peas, lima beans, winter squash, sweet potatoes, and dried beans. Those are all great for you, but higher in carbohydrates. So we do have to count them in our carbohydrate plan. And generally 1/3 to 1/2 a cup is 1 serving of the starchy vegetables. So as long as you're counting your starchy vegetable as part of your carbohydrate content, you'll be good to go. And definitely please put your questions in the chat as we're going along. So here's a few tips when you're in the supermarket. Fresh is the best option when produce is in season. So we are coming up on growing season, which is exciting. And it oftentimes can be more cost effective. So, comparing prices is always a great thing to do. Frozen vegetables are also a great option because they're frozen when they are at their peak freshness. Ideally, you can purchase frozen vegetables in a steam bag. It saves on prep, so then you don't have to wash an additional dish. And then be sure when you're looking at frozen products, try to choose them without added sauces. Again, that will just save you on added fats and calories. And we don't want to forget about canned. Canned vegetables can be a great alternative if fresh or frozen are not available, especially around, think about beans. I buy a lot of beans in cans. When you select canned products, you can look on the label for reduced sodium or packed in water. And then another little trick I like to do is, even if it is reduced sodium, say it's a can of corn, you can open it and pour it in a strainer and then rinse it off. And that takes care of like an additional almost 40% of the sodium is removed. So that's really ideal when you're doing beans. If I buy like a can of black beans, I always rinse them off before adding them to recipes. Probably the only time I don't rinse my beans is when I do chili beans, because I like that extra spice. All right, so on to the starch group, filling a quarter of our plate with starch. So again, that includes breads, cereal, and that's dry cereal or cooked cereal, a third of a cup cooked pasta or rice, and tortillas also go into this category. Some vegetables, as we know, are higher in carbohydrates, and they would be included in this little section of the plate. So this could be your half a cup of dried beans or lentils, as well as a half a cup of potatoes, corn, or peas. And also, don't forget that starches can be found in mixed dishes like casseroles. A great example is like today, I have beef stew in my crock pot at home, and I have potatoes, corn, and peas in that beef stew. So all of that together would definitely count as a couple carbohydrate servings. So we would definitely want to count that. And Grandma was right. We definitely need to get our fiber every day. It helps to increase fullness after we eat. It lowers our cholesterol and helps keep us regular. It can also delay the absorption of glucose, so it really can help regulate our blood sugars. If you like to bake from scratch, you can consider substituting whole wheat flour for some of the white flour in your recipes. It's generally not, you generally can't substitute all the flour. You generally need white flour for some, properties for baking, but you can definitely do a little substitution with the whole wheat flour. So thinking about going to the supermarket and choosing foods that are higher in fiber, this is where we would want to look at the labels for grains. Grains are great for us. They're rich in B vitamins, but a lot of times they can be refined, which means they've been processed an extra step. And generally when food has been processed, a lot of their nutrients like fiber has been stripped. So when you choose whole grain with high fiber, you can ensure that you're getting the nutrients. So products like brown rice, barley, bulgur, quinoa, whole wheat pasta, or even oatmeal, those are all whole grains. And you definitely can't go by the color of it. I think about this, especially on bread. If you see a bread product that says wheat bread, you might think it's whole wheat because it's brown, but the only way to know is to actually look on the label. And as you can see on that slide, when it says look for whole grain first. So for the example, it says ingredients, whole grain rice, then you know that that is a whole grain product. So it'll say like whole grain oats, whole grain wheat. That's what it'll say on the label. And it'll also say made with 100% whole grain. So that's another way of how you know it's whole grain. So we like whole grain to get our fiber. And then the rest of our plate is filled with protein. Protein comes from many sources. Again, thinking about trying to pick a lower fat option and thinking about our serving sizes around meat, poultry, and fish. Remember the deck of cards that we talked about as a 3-ounce serving. Okay, same eggs, peanut butter, nuts, and cheese. These are all considered protein foods. Protein from animal sources has health benefits. It gives us amino acids, which are the building blocks that our bodies use to make new cells. It also helps us absorb more iron from other foods that we eat. Again, we do have to pay particular attention to animal products because they may contain higher levels of saturated fat. So again, just thinking about saturated fat, that is the kind that can raise our cholesterol. That generally is found in beef, pork, lamb, high-fat dairy products. So when you're thinking about your protein foods, those that have less saturated fat, that would be more like your skinless poultry, fish, seafood, and low-fat dairy, sorry. Now we know that beans, peas, and legumes and grains are sources of carbohydrate as well as protein. And so if you are, counting your carbohydrates, you definitely want to keep that in mind. Nuts are also high in fat. Generally, it is the heart healthy fat, but do note they do have a little more calories because they are mostly fat. So just remember that as well. So why do we want to get protein from plant foods? There's been a lot of research done, and a plant-based diet has been linked to better health for people as well as a longer life. Magnesium is a mineral that we get from nuts and seeds, beans, and whole grains. In the body, magnesium helps to regulate our blood sugar and control our blood pressure. And we tend to not get a lot of magnesium from other foods. So that's why eating a plant-based diet is a good option. You might have heard of the Mediterranean diet. That's kind of where this comes from with the plant-based concept. So here's the beans. I could just go on all day about beans because they're just so great. They're a great source of lean protein. They can be added to your meals, as a way to get in a little extra fiber. Again, remember, if you do add them to things, they do have carbohydrates, so you want to count that as part of your carbohydrate total. And rinsing off the canned beans is a great way to decrease the sodium. Also, buying dried beans, that's another cheap way to get a good source of fiber. Seafood, fish, try to choose this a couple times a week for your diet. It has great heart healthy fat and protein. And if you're purchasing like tuna or salmon in a can, look for products that are packed in water. Okay, choosing cuts like salmon, tuna, or halibut are leaner cuts of fish. On to our dairy, adding a serving of milk. We all heard as kids, milk is great for us. Why is that? It has lots of nutrients like calcium and vitamin D, and it does have carbohydrates, but we can include it in part of our diet as long as we count them. And a good serving size of dairy is a cup of milk, 6 to 8 ounces of light yogurt, or a half a cup of sugar-free pudding. And definitely on the yogurt, I would always read the food label. There are so many different varieties of yogurt available. It's always best to look at the serving size, make sure it just says, 1 cup serving, whatever that little cup you have is, and then read it for the carbohydrate content. Because some yogurts have lots of sugar. Milk and dairy products are good sources of calcium and phosphorus that our bodies need, as well as vitamin D and other nutrients that we need for healthy bones. It's best to get the nutrients that make strong bones from the dairy products. Okay, our bodies absorb these nutrients from dairy products very well. If you have a trouble tolerating lactose, that's the sugar naturally found in milk, you can choose milk that's been treated to remove the lactose, such as soy, almond, peanut, or rice milk. Cheese is not included in this part of the plate since cheeses are not higher in carbohydrate. We put those with the protein group. So when you're in the supermarket shopping for your dairy products, just remember that dairy products are a great source of carbohydrates, protein, calcium, potassium, and magnesium. Trying to think about choosing low-fat dairy helps to reduce the total fat intake. If you're shopping for milk, that would be selecting skim milk. So again, looking at the food label to make sure it says skim and not the cap color. Choose cheese products that are made with skim milk. It may say something like low moisture part skim. I sometimes buy cheese made with 2% milk. You know, sometimes you have to really kind of hunt for cheeses that are lower fat. So those are kind of the best two to look for, either with skim or 2% milk. And that would be versus whole milk. Hidden salt as another way to think about. Salt can be found in dairy products, especially cottage cheese. So if you are concerned about sodium, you can look on the label that says 50% less sodium. So that would be less than half. Hidden sugar can be found in flavored yogurt. Again, you can buy products that are sugar-free. So they generally would be with an artificial sweetener. Or if you would like more protein from your yogurt, you could choose a Greek yogurt. And then again, just when you do select your yogurt, think about the serving size and making sure it fits into your carbohydrate budget. A lot of people like a yogurt with fresh fruit on the top. That makes a great snack. And lastly, the fruit. We know fruit contains carbohydrates, but that doesn't mean we don't want to eat fruit because again, it has lots of nutrients, just like our starchy vegetables. As long as we count it, we can include it. Fresh fruit provides fiber. An appropriate size of a small fruit is about the size of a tennis ball. I don't know about you guys, but if you noticed like how the size of even fresh fruits can vary, you can have a really small apple, or you can have an apple that's like the size of 3 or 4 little apples. Okay, so you really got to watch your portions on fruit because it can definitely vary. So canned fruit and frozen fruits can also be great choices. If you choose canned fruit, try to get it packed in water or light, like LITE. That just means extra sugar has not been added. Same with frozen fruits. Make sure that no extra syrup has been added. Generally, a half a cup of canned or frozen fruit is your serving size. And then dried fruits and juice definitely don't fill you up like fresh or canned fruits. So these options should be chosen less often. And the portion size for a juice is about a half a cup. And dried fruit is 2 tablespoons. So think about 2 tablespoons. That's not a whole lot, okay? So you really got to watch your portions on those. So why do we want to eat fruits? They give us antioxidants and lots of vitamins and minerals. Citrus fruits, kiwi, and berries are great sources of vitamin C, which is a very important antioxidant. And again, just remember fruit has more sugar in it. So as long as you are counting it as part of your carbohydrates, it can definitely fit into your meal plan. Choosing whole fruit instead of fruit juice will give you more fiber, which will fill you up and help you to eat a little bit less. Snacks are a great time to get in fruits if you are kind of missing your fruit intake for the day. So when you're at the supermarket, like vegetables, consuming a variety of fruits. So, you know, you don't want to eat the same thing every day. If you eat a variety of colors and textures, then you will be getting more vitamins and minerals in your diet. When you're purchasing fruit, try to choose freshly colored fruit that do not have bruising. When thinking about buying fruit, always want to consider what season we're in. So we're, you know, getting ready to go into late spring and summer. So the berries are going to be coming into season pretty soon. Then we're in summer, melons will be in season. So generally when things are in season, fruits are more affordable and generally taste better too, which is a plus. So when you're out of season and you would like, you know, those kind of fruits, definitely that's when frozen produce is a great option. And sometimes stores put that on sale, so it's good to stock up when they go on sale because frozen produce will last way longer than fresh. Canned fruit is an option also, just like our canned vegetables. You want to look for canned fruit that's packed in water or 100% fruit juice. You can also look for the label that says no sugar added. This will help cut back on sugar and calories. Generally, it also means an artificial sweetener has been added. So if that's, a concern for you, just be aware. Just to be sure to read the label and see what's in the product. And that would be around the ingredient list. Are we having any questions so far? You guys are quiet as a mouse. Okay, then we are going to think about coffee and alcohol. I think it's funny how they put this on the same slide. So coffee intake, let's face it, is a morning staple for many of us, right? There is some research that shows that too much caffeine, and they are calling this about 4 cups or more, can be linked to higher blood glucose levels after meals. So there's not been a lot of research that determines, what is a safe level of caffeine. So there's not really a recommendation. They're just saying, like the American Diabetes Association says, moderate intake should be fine. If you notice yourself being pretty jittery, then, you might want to consider swapping out your morning Java for some decaf. If you notice your blood sugar is raising and you're drinking a lot of coffee, that too may be an issue. So you just kind of have to, monitor it, look at your diet and make an assessment. You could always switch to decaf or even try a different kind of tea. Now about alcohol, many people with diabetes wonder if alcohol is okay or not. This is a great question to talk about with your doctor, but in general, the guidelines from the American Diabetes Association say you should not drink when your blood glucose is low or when you haven't eaten anything. So if you have an empty stomach, it's not a good time to have an alcoholic beverage. And why is that? Alcohol can cause hypoglycemia, so your blood sugar can go down shortly after drinking and even up to 24 hours after drinking. So if you want to drink alcohol, check your blood sugar before you drink and eat either before or while you're drinking. And then you should also check your blood sugar before you go to bed to make sure it's at a safe level. So moderation is key. Women should not consume more than 1 alcoholic beverage a day. And for men, it's no more than 2 per day. And please make sure you communicate with your doctor, if you are drinking alcohol, especially if you're taking medication. And something else to keep in mind, symptoms of too much alcohol and low blood sugar, which is called hypoglycemia, are similar. So things like sleepiness, dizziness, and becoming disoriented, those can all be either from too much alcohol or low blood sugar. So you don't want to confuse, low blood sugar for drunkenness because you may not get the proper treatment that you need. So the best way to always make sure you get the help you need if you tend to go low with your blood sugar is to wear an ID that says, I have diabetes. So that's something to think about. If you haven't already thought about that, I think it's a good idea to consider. So now we're going to put it all together and plan a meal together. So it's going to be less of me talking and more of you guys interacting. So that will be good. Doesn't that meal look good here during dinner time? All right. So following a regular pattern of eating with consistent amounts of carbohydrate at each meal and snack can help you have better control of your blood sugar levels. So going back to our Idaho plate method for diabetes, We're going to think about an option for each of these categories. We're going to plan a breakfast meal first. So think about your typical breakfast. For me, I know what I eat for breakfast. We're going to just kind of go through each food group. So does anyone eat fruit for breakfast ever? If you do, and you want to say what you have or put it in the chat, and we'll try to think about what you typically have and then an example menu as well.
Okay, so Missy says that she has grapefruit.
Oh my goodness, look at this. Half a grapefruit. I didn't tell her to say that. So depending on the serving size, I don't know what you're typically eating, Missy, but for this example, half a grapefruit is considered a fruit serving. And that is a common choice, I think, for fruit at breakfast. How about meat or a protein? Does anyone do meat or protein at breakfast?
Janet says sausage.
Sausage, definitely, that could be a choice.
Turkey bacon as a choice.
Good.
Sometimes regular bacon.
Sometimes we want to splurge, and that's fine. This example is one egg that is scrambled. So if you have a scrambled egg, this would be in your meat group. Okay. How about that starchy bread grain group? I think this is where most of us probably eat something if you eat breakfast, which hopefully you are. Anybody eat a bread or cereal that they'd like to share?